For millions of years, this lake thrived. But now it is dying. Poisoned by humans, who put themselves above nature. It's time to stop the killing. It's time to heal our planet. It's time to remove your footprint. Agenda 21 is coming soon.
Now, there was a film came out called Hunger Games, and this encapsulated in so many ways the society where the global warming bollocks is supposed to take us through justification. Of course, if you look at the symbol of the film, it's the phoenix, the firebird. For those who haven't seen it, it was a world sometime in the future of enormous total control, where different sectors were fenced off and people were not allowed to go in most of the land of the country, and they were controlled from something called the Capitol, which was an elite that was served by all the poor people and hungry people around the country. They had games every year where two young people were picked from each sector who had to fight on live television. And the one who won was the one that stayed alive after all the others were killed. The idea was to kill all the others and win the game. As Dr. Richard Day said in 1969, violence, pornography and obscenity in the media and movies will be increased to desensitize people to violence and porn and make them feel life is short, precarious and brutish. And the Hunger Games was a classic, but it was more than that. It was a symbol of the society that we're heading towards so fast. This was one of the elite in the Capitol, the equivalent of what people call the 1%, although as I say, the real control is in far fewer than that. And we have a version of the Hunger Games, and it's called Agenda 21 Sustainable Development, and it is being orchestrated outside or through the United Nations, and it is a stalking horse, a Trojan horse for world fascism.
Nothing really new, but it's picking up steam and it's building momentum in certain circles. The worst part is, you may not even be aware of it, but groundwork is being laid. One of the main reasons for these same old tired ideas being revitalized is because those pushing globalism and government control on a global level have mastered the art of hiding it in plain sight and then just dismissing it as a joke. A great example would be this: the United Nations Earth Summit, Agenda 21. Yeah, that kind of sounds like Fahrenheit 451. I don't think that ended well. Agenda 21. They refer to it as sustainable development. Well, that sounds good. Gee, Wally, that sure sounds great to me. I mean, who's against development, especially the sustainable kind? Yeah, you might change your mind when you hear a little bit of the background of sustainable development. Here's how Agenda 21 is defined by the United Nations. A comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations system, governments, and major groups in every area in which humans impact the environment. Wow, that's kind of broad. Now, it has been adopted by more than 178 governments. I believe there's only 191 on the planet. The United Nations had their big conference on the environment and development in Rio back in 1992, and that's when everybody jumped on board. But it sounds harmless. It's only Agenda 21. Yeah, go look this one up, because it's not so harmless. And it really, can I tell you something? You have to dig pretty deep into this thing. I mean, because look at all this. It doesn't get spooky until about here. Just section 1.
At its core, Agenda 21 is about control. Control over land, natural resources, and entire populations. It seeks to control the air by regulation of carbon emissions, the ground by sustainable development, and the sea through environmental regulations. Officially stated, Agenda 21 is a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations system, governments, and major groups in every area in which human impacts on the environment. Because being human will always have an impact on the environment, Agenda 21 paves the way for extraordinary UN control. When you boil it down, there are 9 basic tenets of Agenda 21. Move citizens off private land and into urban housing. Create vast wilderness spaces inhabited by large carnivores. Eliminate cars and create walkable cities. Support chosen private businesses with public funds for sustainable development. Make policy decisions that favor the greater good over individuals. Drastically reduce the use of power, water, and anything else that creates carbon pollution. Use bureaucracies to make sweeping decisions outside of democratic processes. Increase taxes, fees, and regulations. And finally, implement policies meant to incentivize a reduced population.
This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to 0. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to 0. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to 0. That's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
The Earth just cannot handle the sheer number of humans who live here. Something has to give. And I believe that it's up to us who have lived a good life to make sure that our children will have the opportunity to live good lives too. I have lived a good life.
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 Agenda 21 was agreed at the 1992 Earth Summit in Brazil, which was headed by this guy, Maurice Strong, one of the gang big time, a mate of Al Gore. And he said, Maurice Strong, this billionaire oil man, etc., he said, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring this about? What they are trying to do and planning to do is use saving the environment, which these buggers are destroying, to justify deindustrialization and the end of democracy and democratic, which is another thing I could talk about. Democracy and freedom, interchangeable? Don't think so. Anyway, this is the wish list in documents for Agenda 21 operating through the United Nations. An end to national sovereignty, all justified by saving the world, by the way. An end to national sovereignty. State planning and management of all land resources, ecosystems, deserts, forests, mountains, oceans, and fresh water. Agriculture, rural development, biotechnology, and ensuring equity equals slavery. The state is to define the role of business and financial resources. Abolition of private property is not sustainable, they say. Here we go again. How many times has this come up? Restructuring the family unit, children to be raised by the state, people told, this is what Aldous Huxley said in Brave New World, people told what their job will be, major restrictions on movement, creation of human settlement zones, I'll get to them in a minute, mass resettlement as people are forced to vacate land where they live for reasons I'm coming to, dumbing down education, achieved a long time ago, mass global depopulation in pursuit of all of the above. And what they're doing to hide it is they're setting Agenda 21 organizations up in all local communities, all over the world, America, Britain, all over the place, and they're giving the impression that each of these is basically an independent local community initiative, when it's all being orchestrated through this organization, through the United Nations, called Local Governments for Sustainability.